Welcome to Bigfoot Society. If you have Bigfoot activity to report from the same areas discussed in this episode, please reach out to me directly after this episode. And if you'd like to be on the podcast to discuss a personal Bigfoot encounter, please reach out to me directly at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Do you wish there was more Bigfoot Society to listen to every week? Well, there is now. If you become a supporting member over at Patreon, you get a special members-only episode every single week on Wednesdays, and sometimes even more episodes. Head on over to patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. And now let's get on with the show. All right, Bigfoot Society, we've got the privilege of talking to Mr. Harold Benny today. He's a zoologist from Illinois. He's got a very interesting story. Harold, I'm going to let you go ahead and take the reins, my friend.
Okay. About the summer that I turned 60, and I looked at it, this would have been 2007. And this was when I call it the first Bigfoot that I ever saw, although I had a couple of strange things that I don't talk about because they are so strange that happened before. But this is down in Oklahoma. You probably heard of Honobia. The locals call it Honobia. And some of you probably have read a book by Tom Powell called The Locals. And in The Locals, he spends quite a bit of time, and he talks about this little town and some stuff that has happened down there. And I was down there looking around and seeing all the things in the book and everything. But the last night that we were down there with some friends, me and two others had gone, south of town more or less, and spent some time sitting in the bushes and whatever. And we decided to go north of town and get into the hills. They call them mountains. And we went up a mountain road about 10 o'clock at night, maybe 10:30, that we started up the mountain road. And we had an old pickup truck, and I rode in the back of the pickup truck, and the other two just rode in front. And we went up this road. It seemed like forever, but when we stopped and figured it out, it was about 6 miles, maybe 7, and we parked the car or the truck and then walked up a ways, and we crossed a bridge that went across a creek, then up a little hill, and I've got bad legs, so I'm never in a hurry, and I don't mind walking in the dark by myself anyway. I was going pretty slow, and I let the other two just go on up ahead. I got up to the top of the hill, and I had a military-grade thermal. And back then, these thermals didn't do anything except let you see. Now the thermals will record, and they're a lot less expensive, but they're not near as nice as accurate. But anyway, I had this thermal, and I'd been up in this location before. And as I was walking the road, the country road, I would stop here and there and pan through the woods with this thermal. And I hadn't gone too far up this hill to the top of it when I happened to see a head in the bushes moving up and down. And I just froze, didn't move, I had the thermal on this object, and I just stayed there and watched it for quite a while. This head would duck down, and then it would appear again above the bushes a couple feet away. And they're awful big. It was over 7 feet, I know, at least. The thing was, it was only about maybe 40 feet away from me. It was not far at all. And I got a little nervous, a little bit upset at this great big thing that was right there on the side of the road, almost next to me. And I had to stop, take a couple breaths, and I thought, okay, I just had my birthday. I made it to 60. I've always wanted to see something like this my whole life, and have started spending more time out in the woods. And I said, heck, I'm going to watch this. I watched it as long as I could, and then the other two I was with, they came back down the road at me and yelled, and I looked up. And when I looked up, this big animal that I'd been watching and disappeared. It took the opportunity to get back down the bushes somewhere. So the other two came down and was asking me, and I told them what I saw, and one of them I don't think believed me, but one of them, another one that had the thermal, had a thermal. She looked into the woods where I'd been looking, and she saw the animal also. So I had verification right there, so I know it wasn't just my imagination. And she watched it for a little bit, and it was leaning against the tree. It wasn't hiding anymore. And finally, it got away where she couldn't see it either. So I watched it. Oh, probably not a full minute, but 40 seconds, 45, something like that. Actually, and I felt that was quite a while, but it just stayed within a pretty small area, just going back and forth and looking up and down, trying to watching me. And everybody asked me what it looked like through this thermal. It was just completely bright white. And there was no detail really that I could see, except this was big and white. We radioed, and we got a couple other people up there. And actually, we sat in the ditches for a while and just hung around up there. And it was interesting. We knew a couple of guys that were backed up in the woods there, and they weren't too far away. They were camping. I think they were from Kentucky or Tennessee. And we gave them a call on the phone or on the radio because we were on a county road. This county road, though, the hunters took it over and they put gates up. This is back in the hills, so there was nobody stopping from doing this. And the hunters told us they were going to close the gates to keep us out the rest of the night. We called these other guys and we told them they better pack up real quick because the gates were going to get locked up. And the interesting thing, they packed up, they started up their old truck, and when they did, they got howls from behind their campground, and we could hear them. We weren't that far away. We could hear the howls or the grunts and the wood knocks. It's almost like they were communicating and say, hey, we don't know where the one set of guys is, but these guys here are moving. They're doing something. There was a lot of movement, and there was a lot of sound up there. Now, let's see. So that would have been, time that all happened, it would have been really close to right around midnight. Time I had the sightings and we had the other people up there, but nobody else saw anything. We had some smells, but they weren't that strong, and I wouldn't really want to say that the smells were associated with anything else that was right there either. Let me see. We went back down to the truck, and we got out of the area before we got locked in. But actually, for that sighting, that's the main part, and that's about what happened. Just this last fall in October, there was a write-up of that sighting. That's almost 17 years ago. And I spoke at the Murfreesboro Bigfoot Festival this year, and I was interviewed, and one of the guys that interviewed me, he wrote this story that I've just told you. He wrote it up, and it was in the Illinois Country Living magazine that is put out by Electric Co-op. And that's where I thought that you got the story. But now it might not be the best story I've got, but I saw it. There's no doubts about it. It felt like I could almost touch it from where I was standing. And it was probably about as close as I'd really want to get to one. If I'd been any closer, I'd have been in its lap, it seemed. But I can see how some people get the jitters and they get to feeling funny and they don't know what to think. But I consider myself to be really lucky, one of the lucky few to actually see this animal and see it alive and see it moving. And it was at dark, so people are going to say, it was dark, you didn't really see it that well. I saw it pretty doggone good. But actually, that about takes up next afternoon. I had to drive back here to town, and I was excited all the way back. I still get excited when I talk about it. But let me see. I think that's probably about all that I've got to say about that right now.
Harold, do you mind if I jump in and ask you a few questions about that specific memory you have?
Yeah, go ahead.
Perfect. Just because it's very rare to be able to talk to someone from that time period in that location. For the listeners that might not be aware of it, can you explain what you remember of what you heard about the events of the siege at Honobia that happened around 20 years ago in Oklahoma?
It seemed to be, it was a pretty hot spot. And I think there's been a lot of stuff that's been closed down. You don't have the people don't have the freedom to go in and out. I don't think I could even get up that road anymore. Of course, you go anywhere, and the locals have seen these animals or heard these stories, and they take it as just an everyday thing. But there was quite a bit of activity. They have dumpsters brought in, so they had a portable dump, and these animals would get out there and they'd get in the dump. I guess that was pretty common. And they would get into the cattle feeders. They have great big cattle feeders where the tops would pull off and they put the feed in them. They would pull off the tops and get in and get the feed out of them. And it was just real common for everybody. Now, right there in the middle of town, there used to be a little store. And there was a couple cabins for rent. There was a house for rent, and there was a campground. And I think they still have every fall. I think they still have a festival down there. And a couple of my friends do much of the work with it, but I have not been back down there myself for quite a while. Now, there was just an awful lot of activity. It seemed like all the times. I had not just at that area where I was, but all around the town. There was something going on all the time. And there were, I don't know, 3 or 4 sightings around the week that I was down there. I had been out, actually, I was in Arkansas the week before, and then I was in Honobia for about 10 days. And then all my free time was up. I was still working then. And I had to get back. What I should have done, if I'd had any brains at all and had a little bit more time, or I should have made the time, I should have gone back up to where we were and into the woods and really checked it out real well. But I think that I got so excited, and most everybody, I think, would get awful excited that you just lose your common sense. But since then, when something's happened, I search for footprints and hair and whatever, and then see if there's anything else around there. But I felt pretty lucky that I had another person there to sight the same animal, so I didn't. And that brings up something else. Sighting of that animal by just about anybody is so unbelievable that it probably took me 3 or 4 months before I really believed that I'd seen it. And I kept telling myself, finally, I know I saw it. It was right there. It wasn't my imagination. And I actually saw this animal. But I've had a couple other times, a couple other sightings where one of them, it took me 15 years to finally admit in my own mind that I saw it. And another one, I really haven't admitted yet that I saw it. I don't trust my own mind, I don't think. I'm not sure if what in my own mind is, if my mind's making up something or my mind's trying too hard. Some people will try so hard, and everything they see or everything they hear is a Bigfoot. And they don't stop and consider what's actually going on or what could be causing what they're seeing or what they're looking at. And the first thing that pops in their mind is Bigfoot. And there's a lot of animals in the woods, and some of them are pretty fantastic, the things they can do. And you have to stop and consider everything else. And if you can't figure anything that could be causing what you're seeing, then maybe it might be a Bigfoot. And that's the way I try to look at it. I don't know if I answered your question or not. I went around there.
I think that was all right. You definitely need to have a discerning mind is what I'm picking up. But going back to Honobia a little bit. So you said you went to that area because of some events that happened. And it was talked about in Tom Powell's book. When you went to that area to check things out for yourself, it sounded like, did you talk to anyone in the area about the events that had happened?
Not especially the events from that book. Now, we went past, there was one cabin where there was an awful lot of problems, and it was set real close to the main road that came into there from the west, and they had Bigfoot in and around and stealing deer out of the freezer. And I think one of the things that they had done, they had, for some reason, planted peas around there in the garden or in the yard, and the deer came in and liked the peas. The deer were eating the peas, and then they were actually shooting at the deer. And the Bigfoot, they thought the Bigfoot learned that when they heard the shooting at the deer, that meant that there were deer and feeding on the peas in the yard, and they'd come into the house and into the area then. And actually, it was a real small area, and it was a real small cabin. But I guess that they even figured out how to get into the freezers. But I thought that was really interesting. They associated the gunfire with food. So it wasn't chasing them away. It was actually drawing them in. Anyway, there was a cabin across the other way where they'd had some things. I'll tell you one thing. There was one night, several people had the thermals. And one guy called on the radio one night. He said he had a hot one. He said there was a big one. He said it was up this tree back by this other cabin that was to the south of where we were. And so we hot-footed over there, and it was hard because there was a lot of rough ground in this one area. We got over there, and what we found out is that he was sitting back in there, and he was looking up a power pole into a transformer, and he was picking up all the heat off the transformer, and he thought we had a Bigfoot up a pole. So that's just one of the things that can happen. A mistake, and everybody jumped to it and figured they had something up there. But they didn't. It was just a transformer.
That's just a great example about you have people that are probably extremely amped up about those events you were talking about. That is the siege at Honobia that people have probably heard about before. That's what you were referring to with the Bigfoot trying to get the deer out of the refrigerators that were on the cabin porch, I believe is how the story goes. But do you remember, I think there were some investigators that were sent to check it out. And do you remember what happened to the Bigfoot at the end? I don't know if the whole story exists in any one location, I guess I could say.
Yeah, I have it to be in this Tom Powell's book. It'd be as much as anything, pretty much. It'd be in there, but you know what? I haven't reviewed it or looked at it. I really don't know how it ended up, how it is much later, but I think that they did drive him off. I think I heard, I don't know, rumor or not, that a truck driver had seen one of the Bigfoot that had been shot trying to make it back up the woods, and straight south from there was a small hill, and again they call it a mountain, but I really don't know what all finally happened there after that. I should have tried to look it up and reviewed that. It's just been a long time since I've read that. Like I said, it's been 17 years since this all happened to me.
Harold, who were the individuals that you were with? Do you remember the individuals you were with when you were out in the woods and you saw that head bobbing up and down?
Yeah, and I don't really use name one. The one girl that saw it also, she's passed away with cancer.
Okay, sure.
She was a girl from Indiana. Real smart gal. And then there's a guy from Texas, and he still works in the area. And he supposedly had a lot of sightings there, and I won't use his name either because I don't want to draw any heat down on them. I don't use names too often. I don't even like to. People say okay.
I respect that. Yep.
But and that really one reason is that I get as much information as I get, even right here in Illinois, because people that we can work with before, they know I'm not gonna that I might want to tell their story, but I'm not gonna say who they were or exactly where they were, because we don't need people running through their fields and people bothering them. So I kind of lay away from that, and that maybe takes away from some people believing some of the stories. But that's too bad. I wouldn't have the stories at all if I didn't do it that way, I don't think.
And I agree. I think that's the right way to do it. You need to be respectful of people's privacy. And I've had plenty of stories where the person, it gets out, they had a Bigfoot on their property, and then it's reporters. This is back in the 70s. But yeah, you have to be careful sometimes what info you get out. But thank you for talking about the siege at Honobia and what you experienced after that time for a bit there, Harold. Do you mind if we take a little bit step back? And we were talking before the show that you've been into Bigfoot for an extremely long time. And do you mind if we take it all the way back to the beginning and share what you remember from the very early days and then go from there?
I was born in 47, so I've been around a long time. I hope to be around a while yet. But before I was 10, maybe by the time I was 8, I can remember that my dad used to bring home newspaper clippings, magazine clippings, things like that would talk about somebody somewhere saw this caveman, or somebody somewhere saw this ape, or whatever. They didn't even have a name for it yet. And of course, there's been stories going back to, I think, even the 1700s, but he would bring stuff like that home. And he was a pretty smart guy. He didn't have a degree, but he worked as a chemist. And he would just always tell me, "We don't know this is true. We don't know anything about this. This is real or what it is. But keep an open mind, because if you don't keep an open mind, you're never going to learn anything." And so I was brought up that way, to keep an open mind. And so he would. I remember throughout my younger childhood, he would bring stuff home like that. And then I finally forgot about it when I got a bit older and got through high school and got through college. And I'm not sure how old I was, and I finally realized that, hey, with the internet and everything, there's a lot of people gathering a lot of information, and I figured I would just start looking and seeing what was out there. And I found hundreds and hundreds of books. And so I got back into it. Then when I was a little bit older. And like a lot of people, I ended up getting divorced. And then I went paralyzed. And I recovered from that. And I started taking some trips and talking to some people and built up a heck of a library. And this is the thing, if you want to learn anything or research anything or whatever, you need to read everything that's out there and find out what's been done and where it's been done before you start monkeying around yourself, because there's no need to repeat everything that's been done. And I learned quite a bit. And then I got hooked up for a few years with the BFRO. I was an investigator for a few years with them. And then I started leading some of my own small groups and things in Illinois here. And things just build up from there. Let me see. But anyway, I've had my mind on whether or not this animal exists for a long time. And my dad passed away in 99, and that sighting was about 2007, the sighting I told you about. And I'd just give anything if he was still around. And I could go over and tell him about the things I've seen and the things that I know I've seen, and just to let him know that there are things out there that I think he'd really enjoy finding out. And I found that over the years I've had quite a few friends, and I was able to separate out my good friends. I tell them some of these stories and say, I saw it myself. And my good friends would say, if you saw it, I believe it. And I taught school for about 5-6 years too. And now that was before I started doing too much of this stuff. But I've had ex-students who tell me the same thing, get in touch with me, and they said, I always wondered about that animal, and you actually saw it? And I said, yeah, I actually saw it. And I know it's there. And they said, and I'd tell them, I said, if you want to go out with me sometime, I could take you if you want to go. And they said, no, if you say it's there, I don't really want to go. And a lot of people are interested, but they don't want to go out at night and sit in the field by themselves, and I didn't understand that. If I answered that question or not either. But
I would say you did. We talked earlier that you went to school for being a zoologist. I'm very curious your viewpoint as a zoologist. How does a zoologist look at the creature called Bigfoot?
I'd say most of them just think it's a bunch of malarkey. And I've talked to some just recently from around the country that they're in the BFRO, and there's a lot of people that just don't know. And if I hadn't seen it, I'm going to say more than once, I couldn't believe it myself. But there's something out there Doesn't make any sense. There's a lot of things, mostly that don't make any sense about how this animal has lived and reproduced, and there seems to be an awful lot of them in certain areas. And it just biologically, things just don't make sense. But we're dealing with something here. We don't know. We don't know what it is, really. We don't know where it came from. I know there's a lot of theories. We don't know exactly what it is. And there's no experts on this animal. And I know there's some people that think they are, but you can't be an expert on an animal that's not even hasn't been proven to exist. It's just everybody's got ideas, and they pass the ideas around, and it's just hard to come up with anything. So in short, I'd have to say that most of the zoologists aren't going to believe in it, and I think even eventually, if they come up with a good body, no matter where they find it or where they put it, they're still not going to believe it. It's going to be one of those things like everything is today. You can't believe anything you hear or see, it seems. But I just tell myself I saw it. I know I saw it. I have to believe it. But I love to, before I pass away, I love to figure out how it does exist and does the things that it does. I just don't know. Just don't know. It's a heck of a good mystery.
Yeah, I would wager to say it's one of the best, and I hope before the end of my time that there's some sort of definite answer that's finally able to be. Maybe there's a type specimen that's able to be taken, or I don't know, whatever it would take.
Yeah.
Zoologist, what do you think it would take for this to finally be proven? Would it take DNA, a type specimen?
It's like you said, it's going to take a type specimen. Mm-hmm. There's been all this DNA work that different people talk about, but the DNA work is not worth too much because it's used different samples that came from this area and this animal and that animal, and it's all hearsay. It's all hearsay where the samples came from. You're going to have a type specimen. You're going to have to take the samples off the type specimen and run them and find out what it actually is. It's one of the things that really drives me crazy, just because they've run DNA tests. If you don't know where the samples came from, you haven't got anything. And I know a lot of people, that's going to upset a lot of people too, but that's just how it is. We've got to use science, and they need to use science and scientific methods to get this thing figured out. But if it even can be figured out, I don't know. It's a lot, like I said, I've been looking into it a long time now. And about the best we can do is hope to see it now and then. But until we have a type specimen, a type animal to actually run tests on, it's just nothing's going to count, I guess the way to put it.
Sure.
So you know where it's coming from. It doesn't mean anything.
Harold, remind me, were you actively, your relation to Bigfoot research, what was it in the 1970s? Was it existent at all?
Not a lot. In the 1970s, I mentioned the Bigfoot Festival down in southern Illinois. That happened 51 years ago today, and I guess it got a lot of advertisement, publication around the world and stuff. Mm-hmm. But I was working as a chemist 2 miles from where I'm sitting today, and all through all that, I didn't even hear about it. I didn't even know about it.
Okay.
But about through the 70s and whatever, actually, I was still teaching, doing some things, trying to raise a family, mm-hmm. And I had my head in a lot of other places. But I was just picking up some things here and there. And there's time in a guy's life that he's got to be raising a family and worrying about that. And I guess I had where I had my head.
Makes sense. Totally get it. So we talked earlier about you've spent a lot of time researching Bigfoot in Illinois, which is where you're based out of. And I've been able to talk to a few people from Illinois. There's definitely some things going on northeast of Peoria in the northern part of the state. There's the Shawnee area down in the south part of the state, and you've got Little Egypt and all that good stuff down there. But what has your research been like in the state over the years?
Okay, when I go, I spend as much time in the Shawnee as I can. And basically in Illinois, If you're not in the Shawnee, you're someplace where you probably haven't got permission to be. That's a big thing. If you get out of the park ground, the public ground in Illinois, you just haven't got permission to be there. So I spend a lot of time in the Murfreesboro area on that side of the state, and south about as far as you can drive down to Jonesboro and even further. And then I go over to Harrisburg and south from Harrisburg, and I've got a little private park down there that I use. It's Williams Hill Pass. I use that a lot and always have something really strange and something really stands out every time I go down there. And sometimes an awful lot of stuff happens down there. But a lot of stuff happens at Murfreesboro. I cannot sometimes decide when I have a few days where I want to go, because both those areas are good. And the thing is, there's a lot of ground down there that you can get on. Now, I've brought 10, 15, 20 BFRO investigators right up here to Montgomery County, to Hillsboro, and try to do some things up here too. But I can't keep them off the private ground. I'll have ground that I've had permission to use, but I don't know, maybe they're just not used to keep the people being protective of their ground. You've got to treat these farmers nice. They've got to want you. Maybe sometimes you got to shoot a few coyotes to get permission to get on there and do anything. Except if they think they've got something, they'll call you and ask you to come down and look. But the big thing is, who owns the ground, and do I have permission to get on it? And now, like I said, I'm in Hillsboro, and I have a lot of sightings. They like an awful lot of them, which is funny. And all that go back maybe 35 years. All around this town, from where I'm sitting right now, I could go 6-7 miles north or south and be in areas where there's been 3 or 4 sightings. I could go east and west and not quite as many sightings. The thing about Hillsboro here is, I think that makes it so good, we've got the Shoal Creek, that's called, and it's a 3-branch creek. And Hillsboro sits at the top of the branches between the East Branch and the Middle Fork, the Middle Branch. And then Litchfield is 8 miles to the west, and there's another branch, but it's shorter, and it joins into the Middle Branch after just maybe 10 miles. The thing with me, we've got, again, it's all privately owned ground, but we've got water and lots of food. And with these 3 creek branches, I think it's just ideal for something like this. And I guess I'm lucky I was raised and brought up here, and I've still got a few living relatives, and I know a lot of people, and I can get on this ground. And people help me, and people cooperate with me, and people that don't even know me know of me. And when something happens, I get telephone calls, and I don't use any computer communication of any sort or whatever really anymore, and I just don't get involved with that. I just use regular old telephones and word of business cards, and I'm really surprised at the number of people that do get a hold of me. And a lot of people, there's 2 things. A lot of people want to know if they've got something going on in their property. They think, man, there's something strange out here. And they call me, and I go out, and I try to look and decide what I think from what I can see, if they have got something strange on their property. And then there's people that don't really want you on their property, but they've been scared of something. They say something's not right in the woods. So I try to help them. And it's, plus maybe the biggest thing, if they've seen something or had something going on, they're afraid to say it, to tell anybody. I've had guys that wouldn't even tell their wives that they've seen something. But if they call me, time they call me, they know that, like we already said, I'm not going to be giving up their name or where they live or their property or what they've seen. so they can be identified. And between those two things, I think that makes a lot of difference. But down in southern Illinois, you got an awful lot of ground, but it's in the Shawnee, it's spotty. You do have to be careful. But that's the thing. I respect everybody's ground, everybody's property. And if I'm with people, I expect them. And I do warn people. I says, don't cross those fences and bother anything. Take care of this place just like it's you own it. And if they do that, we're fine. But I have had some people get in trouble because they just don't think they have to worry about getting on anybody else's property. But anyway, that's a big difference between north and south. Is available property.
Over the years, did you ever do any research up in Iowa? Just curious.
I've been to Iowa a couple times. I had a friend that I can't even think where he is now, but I haven't been there for years. And I've gone up there to a couple of park areas. I'd have to get out the map and see it and into some old notes to see where I even was now. But I have cast one or two prints in Iowa.
Really?
In one of the parks. I remember that. But one of the guys that I used to go up with, he's kind of everything's a Bigfoot.
Sure.
And I'm actually the other way. There may be something there, but it's probably not a Bigfoot. There's a lot of animals in the woods of all sizes and shapes. And of course, I've hunted and fished and hiked and skied and about any outdoor sport you can do. And so I'll be 77 in a couple months. I spent my life doing all that kind of stuff, coyote hunting and just about everything. So I've been in the woods a lot and seen a lot. And a lot of the people in some of the Bigfoot organizations say if you're a hunter or you look like a hunter in the woods, you're not going to see anything because you're going to scare it all off. And I tell them if you're a hunter or a real outdoorsman, you know what's in the outdoors, and you don't jump at every single thing and say it's a Bigfoot. And that is a difference. And you know what you're looking at, what's around. But it's the things that you don't know, that you can't figure out, that really spook you. Like that thing I watched at 40 feet away from me in the middle of the night. That kind of spooked me.
If you ever get the chance to look through your notes and you happen to find where you cast those tracks at in wherever it was in Iowa, I'd be curious to know. I'm from just outside of central Iowa myself, to the west. So trying to find all the historical info about what's happened in the state. But
I think I was more northern.
Yep.
It's at least marked on a map or something somewhere. And I used to a lot of times keep a notebook for almost every trip I took.
Oh, wow.
Like a 3-leaf book. And it's back when I was making those trips, I was sick. I went through a period where I had bad pancreas infections, and I had 3 types of cancer.
Oh, wow.
And so I've been really lucky. And knock on wood, I need to go in for another cancer test here real soon, and I hate to do it.
Sure.
Because I don't want them to find any more. But yeah, I remember the last time I went to Iowa, I was sick. But I'm pretty sure I know I was north of Cedar Rapids.
Yeah, that's a really squatchy area up there. Yeah.
Yeah, when you get up in there, I was north of there, and maybe I was a little bit west of there.
Yeah.
But yeah, if I run across it, I'll do that. Now, I have got one of these days I need to get with you. I've got another story that I don't talk about. It happened before this one I was talking about tonight. It's more or less gets you into paranormal Bigfoot.
Sure. Which,
being a scientist, I've always tried to stay away from that. But what I've learned is over all these years is that you really can't stay away from it. I don't pay that much attention to a lot of the really strange things. But when I was with the BFRO, see, BFRO has a special file. If somebody mentions in their Bigfoot story, get into a paranormal, type things, or says, well, they got out of a spaceship or something weird. We've got a file that we just put them in. So there should be all saved, but it's full of really weird stuff. And I gave you a name one day we were talking, Carter Burchard. Did you ever get a hold of him?
He's on the list of people. I know he's got multiple books that are supposed to be very good reads, but he is on the list for me to talk to. Yeah.
And he's writing another one right now. And he started BFRO. I was already with him for a while, but he started with him, and he was one of the guys that would come up here to Illinois and do some things. And we haven't been together for a little bit, but he's had so much, I don't know what you call it, paranormal, I'll just call it, for so much stuff that that's where he started spending time instead of just throwing them out. He started going more and more into this stuff. And that's where all his books have pretty much come from. I guess the book that he's finishing up right now, it's basically about habituations. But the others, he wrote 3 books, but one of them that he wrote, he went back into it and added a bunch of stuff. So there's a new volume under the same book. But yeah, he lives over by Kansas City, and you get a hold of him, tell him where he got his name, and he does a lot of podcasts, and he's, like you said, he writes some good books and stuff. So now I got off of whatever I was talking about. Where was I?
It's just, it feels like a few times during the interviews so far, it feels like there's something that you've experienced that you want to share, but you're very, I don't know if I want to share it, but it feels like you want to share something.
That other story that I just mentioned, that happened down in Mena, Arkansas, and it was like 10 days before that one I talked about. But I don't know how long it would really take for me to tell that story. I've only really told it once, and it's at least, it'd be 17 years ago too. Yeah, I've only told it once, and I put it, you say you found this story on Facebook. It's on Facebook also. And I told it, even a couple of my friends said, I'm having trouble believing that story. I said, that's why I never told it to anybody over all these years, because it's strange. And I don't know if you want to do it another time or...
It's up to you, but I do have the time now, and it might be one of the things where we're both on the same call now, and if you've got a few minutes, but up to you. I want to respect your time, of course.
Yeah, I don't even know what time it is. It's 9:30, is it? Okay.
Yeah, about 9:30. So.
And you usually run to 10, don't you?
Give or take, but
okay.
I would love to be able to have you share your story if you're cool with that.
Yeah, let's try it.
All right.
Like I said, it's even with some of my friends, they just have trouble with it. But we're getting into the paranormal stuff here.
Yeah, no judgment here, Harold. So you feel comfortable with telling it.
Yeah, but nothing like a couple of Bigfoot guys making fun of flying saucers or anything. Right. Nothing worse than Bigfoot guys making fun of each other. Because this was, I think it was south of Mena, and of course that's just a hop, skip, and a jump from where I was in Oklahoma. I started out at Mena, me and some other people, and the strangest doggone deal. We didn't really have any plan or whatever, but one of the guys, we were in Walmart, and most of us were just sitting in the parking lot, and one of the guys went in to get something at Walmart at Mena and ran into this gal that was talking Bigfoot. So we got hooked up with her, and she had a little bitty place down, I think it had to be south, tucked back in there at the base of a mountain. And she said she even was an old school bus in the woods, and the Bigfoot a lot of the time stayed in the school bus for shelter in the winter. That's okay. Anyway, this one night, me and a guy from Kentucky and a woman from northwest of Kansas City. He had a van, and we're all old. They're both older than me. I was about 60 then. And we went down by her place, back in the woods. And this was the darkest place I think I ever saw or ever was at. And maybe it wasn't that dark, it was close to it. This place was dark. So we went down the road past her place and we pulled off and took the van, tuck it back in there a little bit. And then me and the older guy, we got out and she says, I don't really feel good about getting out of here. I think I'll lock the doors of the van here and I'll stay in the van and wait for you guys. And so that's what we did. Me and him, we walked back down the road the direction we'd come from, somewhere between a quarter and a half. We weren't too far down, but we walked down and we were in this gal that invited us down. We were in her driveway. And man, it was dark. And we weren't there too long. And this horrendous scream come from the mountain just off the road to our, it would have still been to our south. And it wasn't too far away, but it was so loud and so scary. I've still never heard anything like it in the woods or whatever. This was an awful scream. We backed up maybe 20 feet into her driveway to get away because it just seemed, boy, something was going to pop out of the woods and it was going to be awful. So we stood there as long as we could. And I'm looking down the road back towards the van, and I'm far enough away I can't see the van, and it's dark. I see this great big white thing cross the ditch, come out of the woods on the mountainside, and he gets in the road, and he starts walking towards us. Like I said, we're a little bit back off of it, though. And I tell this other friend of mine, his name was Waller. I don't think he's alive anymore. I said, hey, that's going to almost run into us. It's coming straight at us. And he says, what? I said, it's big and white and it looks like a Bigfoot to me. And he says, I don't see nothing. He said, you're imagining it. And I said, no, it's coming right at us. And this was scary. From my point of view, I'm watching this. And what do we do? So we backed up a little bit more. And before it got to us, I'm chattering away about this thing coming at us. Before it got to us, it turned, jumped back across the ditch, and started walking up the mountain. And I said, oh, man. And he still didn't see it. He finally convinced me that I was half crazy and that there was nothing there. But back then, I still had pretty good eyesight and pretty good hearing, and he was blind as a bat and deaf too. So I don't know. Anyway, we stayed down there quite a while, and we finally walked back to the van. And here's where it really gets crazy. I was excited about seeing this thing, and I tell the gal who's been sitting in this van, start to tell her about what I saw, and she jumps in. She says, I got to tell you, I got to tell you what I saw. She says, I'm sitting here in the van in the back seat, and all of a sudden, this white Bigfoot materialized or appeared sitting in the front seat. It was sitting there. And I look out the window, and there's a little bitty one, and it's white also, and it's running around outside of the van. And here's where you think about the whole thing, it really gets funny. I hadn't told her my story about, I saw a white one down there. I saw a big white one too. Anyway, we started making fun of her. Three Bigfoot guys making fun of each other. And she got upset, really got upset, and we quit. And I forgot about it. This gal's good. She's straight. She wasn't drinking. She wasn't on drugs, but she saw this thing materialize right in front of her and sat there for a while, kind of looked at her. And then it just disappeared. And I don't know, I wasn't making fun of her, wasn't real heavy about it. She's a real nice gal, and I liked her. And we were actually sitting there making fun of each other and what we saw. And then it was a couple other guys around, and they heard about what I saw, this and that, the other, and I denied it. I denied the rest of the time I was around anybody. I said, no, I didn't see nothing. Walt says I'm just seeing something else. And these guys I was telling this to, they said, if you say you saw something and Walt said you didn't, we'll believe you for we'll believe Walt. Because we think you could have, like I said, I was still a little bit younger, still could see and still could hear. Anyway, left it at that. And I just more or less denied it. It was probably a couple months before I was sitting down one day, and I just happened to think, I saw a white one coming down the road. She saw a white one materialize in the van. I wonder what's going on here. And like I said, I thought about it. It was 16, 17 years I thought about it. And it's one of those 25 stories that I put on Facebook. And it's just one I just forget about it because Walt told me I didn't see anything. And I don't know. I don't know. The fact that what she saw was white and what I was seeing was white. No, I did not see a small one, a baby or whatever, or a toddler or whatever you want to call it. But I don't know. Jeremiah, that's got to be one of the weirdest Bigfoot stories you ever heard.
It's up there, Harold, and it's awesome. So the way I look at it is I have my personally, but we haven't proven what it can do or what exactly it is yet. And at the end of the day, your friend saw a white Bigfoot materialize inside that vehicle, and that's wild. And I don't know how you can explain that away, right?
No, and she's not, like I said, she's not crazy at all or anything. And I haven't seen her for quite a while. As far as I know, I think she's still alive. I see she does put some stuff on Facebook now and then. I see why I don't talk about it.
Sure.
Too much. But I think that's an example of three Bigfoot people making fun of each other, which is funny in itself, that's for sure.
Is it something where and I know you said it's south of Mena, Arkansas, just because it's interesting when listeners hear something and then maybe someone else has experienced something to do with a white Bigfoot materializing in that same area. Are there any other things you can say about the mountain, or do we have to keep it very vague as to it's somewhere south of Mena?
That's one of those things I would have to do some research on it too.
I hear you.
To find exactly. She's not too far off one of the main highways down there, and I think she's south of Mena. Pretty sure of that. But I talked to her. She had a son too, a teenage son, and I talked to him about what was going on with the Bigfoot that she said stayed in the school bus. And he says, yeah, they do. And he says, I guess they'd also been feeding them, and they would come along and they'd hit the house, and hard enough that they would knock stuff off the walls and things, wanting food. And so she's had a problem around there. But most of the people I'm with were associated with the BFRO, and she hated the BFRO. And it was just a strange deal that she ended up inviting us over there to take a look. I guess that's when you get people that will listen to you and believe you, it does make a lot of difference. That's one of the neatest things we do as investigators. Do everything we can to believe people. Now, those are the two best stories I've got. And like I said, that last one, I just haven't told a heck of a lot. Maybe I can figure out where that is. I could come real close. I'm not sure what they call those mountains. If those are I was thinking White Mountains, but I don't know. But yeah, that story there, like I said, it took me 15 years to even think about telling it all. And it didn't lose me any friends or whatever, but they maybe shut their belief in me a little bit. But anyway, that's the kind of junk that my friend Carter was into with those first three books, some things. And he comes over here. There were some spots down around Jonesboro in the Trail of Tears Park that we've hit a few times. And there's one spot down there south of the Trail of Tears Park area, and the locals down there say they won't go into it after dark, and we haven't been into it too much when we've been in it. There's something strange happening there, but again, you don't know. I didn't used to be afraid going into the woods or by myself, and that's usually how I do. I go by myself. And in the dark, I didn't used to be, but I've seen some things over the last few years, and I've really some place I really don't want to, don't feel good about going into. Like I said, basically by myself. Don't know. That David Paulides, his books 411 make you think once in a while, and I imagine you've probably read them, right?
Oh yeah, you definitely want to be cautious and aware, especially if you're going in the woods by yourself, and let people know where you're going and all that good stuff that But It sounds like you saw some weird stuff and that made you think twice about going into the woods at some times.
Yeah, and I've had that even around here. Some spots that I've been to an awful lot. One of them just a few miles from here, I went down one night, and I couldn't make myself get out of the car. I couldn't get out at all. And I sat in the car there probably 20 minutes and finally left. And it spooked me. That was it just all in my mind, or was there something telling me not to get out? And I've been down to the same spot. And the one time that I remember, and got out of my car and did a wood knock and got a wood knock. I'm on an old road that ends at that dead end that a bridge has been torn out. And I got out of my car, did some wood knocks, and got answers right there almost in top of me. And I waited a while and did some more knocks. And I got more answers, maybe 2 or 3 times further away. And I said, wow, and I'm down here by myself. So I don't know. Like I said, I didn't used to be afraid at all. My dad he was, of course, a World War II veteran, and I didn't dare tell him if I got scared in the woods or at dark walking home or whatever, because he let me know. He said, there's nothing in that woods that can hurt you. And he was wrong. I know he was wrong. He's something else. What else you got for me?
Harold, it's been a fantastic conversation, and I just want to thank you for coming on, sharing your stories. I know some of them you haven't really shared before, and I appreciate you being able to share them. I hope that someday you're able to get your book written. I'd love to get a copy of it, and I'm sure my listeners would as well. But it's just been a great time chatting with you, Harold.
That's good. That's good.
Just want to take a few minutes to say thank you to you, all my listeners, for listening to the podcast. Just want to take a few minutes to say thank you to you, all my listeners, for listening to the podcast. Please take a minute to help out the show by subscribing on YouTube, making sure you hit the bell so you don't miss any notifications, and share the episode on YouTube with a friend. Also, if you're listening to us on a podcast, thank you so much. Make sure that you're subscribed, share the show with a friend. Really, it's all about sharing the show wherever you can. If you've had a Bigfoot encounter related to the following or know someone who has, please reach out to me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com or pass on my email. Here's the list. Number 1, encounters from Franklin County, Texas. Number 2, encounters from the entire state of Iowa. Number 3, encounters from Oak Ridge, Oregon, or the surrounding area. Number 4, any individuals that know about Bigfoot being flown off after the Mount St. Helens eruption. Number 5, individuals that have had a Bigfoot encounter while in the military. Number 6, those that have had a Bigfoot encounter in the southern New Hampshire or north central Massachusetts area, including Franklin County, Massachusetts. Number 7, individuals that have had a Bigfoot encounter in a Bible camp or Boy Scout camp setting. Number 8, individuals that have had Bigfoot try to enter their house forcibly while they were living inside. Number 9, individuals that have actively have a Bigfoot living on their property. And lastly, any sightings that are in the Ouachita National Forest area of Oklahoma or Arkansas. A special thank you to all the Bigfoot Society Patreon and YouTube channel members. It's your support that helps keep the show going, and I extremely appreciate it. I'll see you back next time, listeners. Sasquatch Summerfest this year, July 11th through the 12th. It's going to be fantastic. July 11th through 12th in Green Waters Park in Oak Ridge, Oregon. And listeners, if you're going to go, you can get a 2-day ticket for the cost of one if you use the code BFS, like Bigfoot Society, but BFS, and it'll get you some off your cost. Priscilla was nice enough to provide that for my listeners. So there you go. I look forward to seeing you there. So make sure you head over to www.sasquatchsummerfest.com and pick up your tickets today.